So I wanted to give some feedback to everybody on the discussion post for the week. Um, I think a lot of times when we do a discussion post, we think that there's a right answer. And for a lot of the discussion posts for this course, hopefully you're starting to see that there hasn't been a right or a wrong answer, but it's been more taking the information that was presented and figuring out kind of what does it mean to you. So a couple things that I wanted to touch on is that a lot of people seem to think this is something that is administered for children, and it's not. There's a couple of ways that you can do the survey. You can actually, as an individual, administer it by asking the individual the questions, kind of like I did in the video when we reviewed it. The other way is to actually give it to the adult, someone over the age of 18, and just give them the details, the explanation that they're going to look back on their life prior to the age of 18 and see how many of those they answer yes to. So again, a couple of ways to administer it. It can be self-administered or actually administered by the examiner. There is another version that can be used in screening with people under the age of 18, and that has the 8 questions. And we're not really going to get into that in this course. Most of the time when we're doing family therapy, we're probably going to be working more so with adults in the adult population. I would hesitate to use it in a family session with someone under the age of 18. I think it very much changes the dynamics and the purpose that we're looking for. So the next thing I wanted to point out is it is not a test. It is a survey. It is a screening tool, whatever we want to use. Don't use the word test when you're talking to people, because a lot of times it brings about anxiety. They think that there's a right or a wrong answer, or they think that you're looking for a specific answer, and you might not get honest and truthful answers. Ultimately, we just want to know their reality. So I'd hesitate to use the word test. The next thing that was brought up, and again, no right or wrong, is a lot of people got to talking about, would you give it up front, or would you want to wait until you built rapport with people? And I have actually done it during an intake or at the very first session where somebody came back for treatment. And there have been times, because I knew emotionally the person was not at a place where that was going to go real well, that I've waited until we built rapport, until I knew that the person was truly able to look at those questions, answer them honestly, and not feel judged. So it is possible to give it very early on. It really depends, and it takes some clinical judgment, and it also depends on where you're working and what the expectations are. So sometimes this is actually part of an intake packet for some agencies. They just want that screening information up front. And if you work someplace where they say this needs to be done up front, you're going to do it up front. The other thing to remember is, even with those agencies, they typically will identify when that's not appropriate. And so they know that we can't have a one-size-fits-all system. The next thing is, what do you want to gain from the information? And this is what I wanted you guys to really stop and kind of think about, is who I give it to, when I use it, really depends on what is my purpose behind it. So for example, If I'm doing family therapy and I have parents that are very negative about thinking that the individual with the substance use disorder can just, quote, make better decisions. They need to just change what they're doing. And I know that this is someone who had a higher ACE score. I'm going to ask that person, can you fill this out for me? And we can do family therapy with individual people, with the whole family together. What we need to make sure that we're doing is we're disclosing to people what is going to be in confidence and what is going to be shared. So I would probably meet individually with the person with the substance use disorder. I'd then have them fill out the ACE survey for me. I would take that time to educate them as to what their score was and what their score meant. I would then get permission from them and say, can we schedule an appointment where your parents come in and I'm going to share this information, and I'm going to make sure that anything they've answered yes to, their parents are already aware of that. Because if not, that's someplace we would need to start, is making sure that if their parents don't know that they were sexually abused as a child, we need to make sure that their parents first know that before we try to use this tool as psychoeducation. So if their parents are aware of all of the yeses, I then want to use this and say to the parents, we did this study, and this study has been replicated and used in almost every state in the country. And we have found that people who score, and we're going to go through that information that you were provided and show them the outcomes. A lot of times that's what's needed, for people to see that this wasn't a moral failing from the individual, but there are things that have contributed from their history and their past. And it's not a blaming situation. A lot of families have done everything that they can to help protect their children. But unfortunately, we don't always have the ability to, with 100% certainty, guarantee the safety of our kids. We do send them to school, we send them to church, we send them to camps. And I think that's the thing that we need to be able to do, is find that balance. And that's part of why I had put in the discussion about empathy. Getting people to see that it wasn't a moral failure on their part. A lot of times the person with the substance use disorder believes what society has told them, believes that they just weren't good enough. So we really can do that. And sometimes you can use this survey with everyone in the family. One of the ways I like to do that is if there's been a huge history of substance use disorder within the family. And I know that the parent score is more than likely going to be higher than the child's. And I use that as a tool to kind of provide that cheerleading statement to the parents and saying, you know what? Despite the fact that you scored a 6, you changed things in that environment and your child has a 3. Do I wish your child had a 0? Yeah, I wish all of us in the world had a 0. However, what I know is that 2/3 of us have a 1 or more. And that's just the reality of the situation. but I can encourage them and really help them to see that they were able to make changes to help their child have a 3. And when I say child, I'm meaning sometimes adults, 20, 30, 40-year-olds. So again, we need to figure out what our purpose is and approach it very purposefully and with intent. And that's something that you guys definitely, when you get out there in the world, if you're actually doing this in a therapeutic setting, can find out from your supervisor how to best incorporate this and how you want to. So those are just a couple of examples of how we might be able to use the ACE survey. So if you have any questions, again, just post it in the discussion board. Thanks.